22 Facts on How the Italian Mafia Conquered the United States, Cosa Nostra. The American Mafia, also known as the Italian-American Mafia or Cosa Nostra, is a criminal society that emerged in the United States in the late 19th century through the criminal activities of Italian and Sicilian immigrants. Through its basic criminal structure called the family, it controlled a significant portion of illicit operations in the United States, including smuggling and sale of alcohol during Prohibition, robbery, gambling, prostitution, and drug trafficking, among other activities. Although it still exists today, especially in the northeastern United States, its activities have been drastically limited by the RICO Act, which practically ensures life imprisonment for convicted members and the seizure of their assets. Now, let's delve into how the Sicilian Mafia conquered the United States, who the most notorious mafiosos have been, how they organize to achieve their objectives, and what their strict codes entail. But before we dive deep, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications to stay updated with our latest content. Number 1. The Italian Mafia began in New Orleans, United States. The earliest recorded activity of the Italian Mafia in the United States dates back to October 1869, when the New Orleans Times reported that the 2nd District had been invaded by known and notorious Sicilian murderers, counterfeiters, and thieves. These individuals had formed a kind of general partnership or anonymous society for the plunder and disturbance of the city. The immigration of southern Italians to the Americas had initially begun with Argentina and Brazil, and the city of Louisiana, located at the mouth of the Mississippi River, had active port traffic from these two South American countries. In New York, criminal groups progressed from small gangs in impoverished Italian ghettos to more structured organizations in the metropolitan area during the first decade of the 20th century. Number 2. The Black Hand was a criminal practice, but not the mafia. In the early 20th century, a method of extortion called the Black Hand was developed and used in Italian neighborhoods in New York. This practice is often mistakenly confused with the mafia. The Black Hand represented a criminal activity, but there were many similar bands operating independently without any coordination or centralized command. The criminals of the Black Hand always used the same extortion method in all Italian communities, which led to the confusion with the mafia. The first known mafioso to immigrate to the United States was Giuseppe Esposito, the leader of a gang of 7 criminals from Sicily who fled after murdering 11 landowners and 2 high-ranking officials in a province of Sicily. Although they were arrested in New York in 1881, Esposito eventually returned to Italy. Number 3. The first murder attributed to the mafia in the United States occurred in New Orleans in 1890. Between the late 19th century and the first 2 decades of the 20th century, the Five Points Gang, founded by Italian-American Paul Kelly, was very active in the small Italian community of Lower Manhattan, New York. Similarly, a mafia group operated in East Harlem, and the Neapolitan Camorra acted in Brooklyn's 19th District, which had a concentration of Italians and became known for mafia crimes and vendettas. The first incident involving the mafia in the United States that received national and international attention also took place in New Orleans when Police Superintendent David Hennessy was assassinated in 1890 in an execution-style killing. Although there is no absolute certainty that Italian immigrants were the perpetrators of the crime. Number 4. The alleged culprits of Hennessy's murder were acquitted, and a massacre occurred. It is unclear whether Hennessy was killed by Italian immigrants, and there is a version suggesting that the crime may have been orchestrated by local nativists to incriminate the vilified lower-class immigrants. The murder led to the arrest of hundreds of Sicilians, most of whom were falsely charged. Although 19 individuals were eventually accused of the crime, the alleged perpetrators were acquitted, and rumors spread that witnesses had been intimidated or bribed. On March 14, 1891, an outraged mob in New Orleans killed 11 of the 19 Sicilians who had been acquitted, while the other 8 managed to escape. Of the 11 deaths, 8 were by gunfire and 2 by hanging. Number 5, the Mafia took control of bootlegging and liquor sales during Prohibition. In January 1919, the United States Constitution was amended, marking the beginning of the Prohibition era, when the manufacture, transportation, and sale of alcoholic beverages became illegal. This created a conducive environment for criminal activity aimed at providing alcohol to the public, who could no longer access it legally. Organized crime, including the Mafia, became involved in this illegal trade. Although not all alcohol-related criminal activity during Prohibition can be attributed to the Mafia, the homicide rate increased by over 40%. Number 6, illicit distilleries connected to the Mafia were in full swing. During the first 3 months of Prohibition alone, $500,000 worth of whiskey stored in government depots was stolen under servile conditions. This illegal activity generated enormous profits, and high-ranking criminal figures, as well as police chiefs and judges, saw the opportunity to become wealthy. Lower and mid-level officials received their share of bribes based on their level of cooperation. Most of the smuggled alcohol came from Canada and the Caribbean, while the American Midwest became the main hub for clandestine distilleries. Number 7, victorious Mafia families became wealthy during Prohibition. As the fascist leader Benito Mussolini rose to power in Italy and began implementing vigorous measures against the Mafia in Sicily, waves of Italian immigrants fled to the United States, including members of the Sicilian Mafia. Most of these immigrants settled in modest apartment buildings in poor neighborhoods and chose to join the existing Mafia organizations. The profits from illegal alcohol far exceeded those from traditional crimes such as extortion, gambling, and prostitution. Prohibition allowed Mafia families to amass fortunes, and the factions that controlled alcohol trafficking in their respective cities laid the foundations of their family structures in each location. Number 8, the first leader of the American Mafia was Salvatore Maranzano. In the same decade of the 1920s, the war for control of the lucrative alcohol business began, pitting Italian families against Jewish and Irish gangs in New York. Frankie Yale fought for territory against the Irish White Hand Gang, and in Chicago, Al Capone massacred the North Side Gang, predominantly Irish, on Valentine's Day 1929. By the end of the decade in New York, two dominant families emerged, Joe the Boss Massaria's and Salvatore Maranzano's. Massaria was assassinated in April 1931, and Maranzano divided the city among 5 families, positioning himself as the first leader of the American Mafia. Number 9, Maranzano was not the first organizational brain of the Mafia. Maranzano was the first organizational brain behind the criminal organization as it is known today. He established the structure of the families, the code of conduct, and the procedures for resolving disputes. However, in a risky move, he declared himself the boss of all bosses, demanding tributes from the other families, which did not sit well with the other family organizations. Nevertheless, on September 10, 1931, a few months after his audacious power play, Maranzano was assassinated on the orders of Charles Lucky Luciano. Luciano, a former subordinate of Maranzano, switched sides and orchestrated the murder of his former boss before establishing his own power. Number 10, Lucky Luciano founded the Commission in 1931. In the same year, Luciano created the Commission as an alternative to the boss of all bosses. It was a committee in which the bosses of the most powerful Mafia families would decide on important matters and resolve disputes on equal footing. This body governed the American crime syndicate without opposition and brought a period of peace and prosperity to the participating families. By the mid-20th century, the Commission recognized 26 families, 1 for each city, except for the 5 families in New York. Each family operated in an almost exclusive territory and maintained independence from others. Unlike the early bosses like Maranzano and Massaria, who only worked with their fellow Italians, emerging families like the Young Turks were more willing to collaborate with other ethnic groups, especially Jews. Number 11, The Mafia diversified after the end of Prohibition. The American Mafia thrived according to a set of rules originating in Sicily, which included a hierarchical structure for the family and a code of silence that punished cooperation with the police with death. After Prohibition ended in 1933, the Mafia had acquired wealth and experience and expanded its activities into other illicit businesses such as illegal gambling, extortion, particularly labor racketeering through control of unions, loan sharking, protection rackets, and drug trafficking. The Mafia's union connections allowed them to launder their fraudulent income through legitimate businesses in sectors like construction, transportation, and others. Number 12. Myelansky developed the lucrative casino business in Cuba. No real estate project in New York or any other city saw the light of day without paying tribute to the Mafia. The Mafia's control over the docks facilitated another lucrative business, stealing valuable cargo from incoming shipments, which was then sold through an illegal commercial network. In the 1930s, Myelansky, a close associate of Luciano, ventured into the illegal casino business in Cuba. This activity became even more profitable when his friend, Fulgencio Batista, came to power as the president, allowing the Mafia to invest in legalized casinos. Number 13. The Mafia turned Las Vegas into the gambling capital of the world. Las Vegas became another source of fortune for the Mafia once the state of Nevada legalized gambling in the 1940s. Families from New York, Chicago, and other American cities began to have interests in the city's casinos, turning it into the gambling capital of the world. One of the major sources of financing for these investments was the pension fund of the powerful Teamsters Union, controlled by the Mafia through their associate Jimmy Hoffa. Operating in the shadows, the Mafia managed to evade law enforcement until 1951 when the US Congress focused its attention on the criminal organization. Number 14. The Mafia collaborated with the United States during World War II. During World War II, the US government seized the French transatlantic liner SS Normandy in New York and renamed it the USS Lafayette for use in troop transport. In 1942, the ship caught fire at Pier 88 and sank in the depths of the Hudson River. The Navy, fearing it had been sabotaged, established an agreement with Lucky Luciano. The deal stipulated that the Mafia, which controlled the New York docks, would keep these areas free from potential saboteurs. In return, Luciano, who was serving a minimum sentence of 30 years in prison, was released in 1946 and deported to Italy, never to return to the United States. Number 15. Joe Valachi was the first informant of the Italian-American Mafia and creator of the term Cosa Nostra. In 1951, a Senate committee held the Kefauver hearings and declared that a sinister criminal organization known as the Mafia operated in the United States. Many alleged mafiosos were summoned, but few testified, and none provided relevant information. In 1957, the New York State Police raided a Mafia summit known as the Appalachian Meeting, re-arresting significant figures in the criminal world. Following this event, the FBI had to acknowledge that organized crime had reached the status of a serious problem in the country. In 1963, former mafioso Joe Valachi became the first high-level informant to collaborate with the authorities, providing detailed information about the presence and organization of the Mafia. Valachi is credited with coining the term Cosa Nostra as a synonym for the Mafia. Number 16. The RICO Act became a more effective tool to combat the Mafia. In 1970, the U.S. Congress passed the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, which became the most powerful legal tool to combat the Mafia. The law provided extended criminal penalties, punishing convicted offenders with up to 20 years in prison for each charge, as well as economic sanctions such as the forfeiture of all assets obtained through illegal activity. The great virtue of the RICO Act and its conversion into the most powerful weapon against the Mafia was that it targeted the entire criminal enterprise, not just individuals who could be replaced, thus disrupting the continuity of criminal activities. Number 17. The mafia avoids killing government authorities. The mafia kills without hesitation when they believe they have no other choice. However, several families prohibit the assassination of government authorities due to the heavy reprisals such acts tend to bring, resulting in significant financial losses for the criminal syndicate. In some cases, families even punish with death those planning such crimes. According to reports, mafioso Dutch Schultz was murdered by his colleagues in 1935 after the commission denied him permission to kill prosecutor Thomas Dewey, but Schultz persisted in his plans. Number 18, family members must be Italian Americans of Italian blood. The Italian-American Mafia operates with a strict hierarchical structure of Sicilian origin established by Salvatore Maranzano in 1931. This organizational chart includes a boss, an underboss, a consigliere, counselor, at least one caporegime, captain, and various soldiers and associates. The occupants of these positions must be Italian Americans of Italian blood, except for associates who are not full-fledged members of the family and come from any background. All members of the criminal family are considered made men, meaning they are untouchable in the criminal underworld, and attacking them will result in retaliation. A boss rarely interacts directly with soldiers to give them instructions, instead, orders are transmitted through the chain of command. Number 19, the boss and underboss roles. The boss and underboss are likened to the president and chief executive officer of a family. The boss is the head of the family, operating as a dictator often referred to as padrino or don. The fact that the boss transmits orders through a chain of command allows him to isolate himself from the execution of crimes, making it more difficult to bring him to justice. The underboss is the second in command within the family and is usually appointed by the boss. They oversee day-to-day activities and closely supervise the most lucrative businesses. The underboss is often seen as the natural successor to the boss when the boss goes to prison or needs to be absent for long periods, making them the potential next leader. Number 20, associates perform a wide range of tasks. An associate is not a full member of the family, but they have a connection to it that can be of little or great importance. They can be runners, enforcers aspiring to become soldiers, or investors willing to increase the family's wealth. When a family needs to recruit a soldier, the best Italian-American associates are evaluated to fill the position. Associates also include intermediaries used by the family to sell stolen goods and unionists who collaborate in labor extortion. Associates like these held considerable power in the businesses associated with the families they worked with and were respected by the bosses. Number 21, new members must take an oath. The initiation ritual to become a made man emerged from various sources, such as Roman Catholic brotherhoods and Sicilian Masonic lodges of the 19th century. In the initiation ceremony, the officer pricks the initiate's finger with a needle, and a few drops of blood are spilled onto a card with the image of a saint. The card is then set on fire and quickly passed from hand to hand among those present before it burns completely. The initiate pronounces an oath of loyalty to the family, becoming a member. This oath is called omertà, which was confirmed by Tommaso Buscetta, a Sicilian mafioso who became an informant for Italian authorities in 1986. Number 22, the mafia does not accept homosexuality. A hit or murder of a made man must be authorized by the leader of their family after presenting compelling evidence of the reason for the sanction, such as a violation of the oath or betrayal. Failure to observe this requirement risks starting a war. The mafia is a male-dominated world, and women are entirely excluded from its activities, except for rare exceptions, such as when a husband goes to prison. Homosexuality is not accepted, and it is claimed that Carmine Galante, the acting boss of the Bonanno family, was murdered in 1992 due to suspicion about his sexual orientation. Although it no longer possesses the immense power it had in the 1970s, the American Mafia continues to be present in New York and other cities in the United States, engaging in a wide range of criminal activities. We hope this video has been useful to you. If you have anything to add, please share it with us in the comments section. Like this video and share the link with your family and best friends so they can also learn more about the 22 facts on how the Italian Mafia conquered the United States. Thanks for watching. If you found this video interesting, make sure to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. We'll be back soon with more curiosities from history.